Okay, we're gonna see. We're gonna see if this works. It should be streaming. It should be streaming. Okay, well that works. Okay, that worked. All right, so now we've got to start a call with the one and the only Mr. Cory Banta. So let me get him on a start an instant meeting here. Copy. Let's get him on the Discord. What's going on, guys? It's been a wild day. Try joining here. All right, let's see if he pops up for us. Desktop transition. Okay, here he is. Here he is. Oh, you should probably. Boop. Oh, can I start? Wait a minute. How come you can't see my camera? Hold on, the video. Oh my gosh, that's a lot. Don't want that. It was on for infinity. Let's do this. That way you can kind of see me. Where's the okay? The chat should be there too, so that's good. That's good. Now we just got to get Cory to join on in. Let's see. Nice. I'm glad something's there. I got to be over here. Let's check the stream. Oh, there we go. Hey, I can see chats too. Look at that. All right. Oh, and the latency is super low. How do I get this to? Oh my gosh. Wait, no, scroll down. Oh my god, this is odd watching myself in delay. Hey everyone. Anyone got questions about liminal spaces? I don't know why I chat because you can hear me clearly right here. Today's stream is brought to you by chocolate chip cookies. Made by my mother-in-law. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate it. All right, Cory's going to join us here very shortly, and we're going to have a good time. I should be able to. It shows how like far out of practice I am with streaming, right? Gosh, I don't even know how to change my settings in OBS. Oh, don't have a kid, man. It'll change your life. Reset. There you go. Reset that. Okay, great. See if I can make this bigger. There. Now you can kind of see some stuff. Maybe I can just put this here. There we go. I'll put Cory. Drag him there when he shows up. He's downloading the software, but we'll be there in a sec. So it's just us for now. It's closed captioning when you type what you said. Yeah. It is. Oh man.
Hello?
Hey, I can hear you. Can't see you. You joined with your phone, it looks like.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. The app was being weird. Let me see if I can choose another phone number or email address to call. Is not in contact card, is not available for FaceTime. Okay, that's strange.
Wow. There's two. Hold on, wait. Did you join the second link that like has you dial in?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. There's a first link.
The first one wasn't working. It just led me to the download page.
Oh. Oh, well, what if we go back to we should have just stayed in your Zoom channel is what we should have done because well, I don't know if I'm allowed to announce this, but we just recorded a podcast for Cory's thing. So
yeah.
Build the hype.
No, that's fine, except the Calvin who had the equipment is leaving. I could just download Zoom on my phone though.
It won't let you download the Google Meets app?
No, I have the Google Meets app. But when I go to the link you sent me, it just leads me to the download page on the App Store, even though I already have it downloaded.
Oh, that's annoying. Okay, how about this? What if you go back to the the Riverside link that I sent you?
Okay.
Because
Let
I
me
mean
try
that worked. I just need to see your face.
Okay.
What if we do that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Hold on.
That might work.
But then it wouldn't be live casting.
Well, but I'm live casting it I'm sharing my screen, so it's live casting it there. That's how I cheated the system.
Hold on, it's saying it needs to restart. It's saying audio failure. The microphone speaker stopped working.
I don't know.
Maybe because I'm also Google.
Oh yeah.
Whatever.
You'll have to leave this in order to join Riverside again. That's
Okay.
true. That's true. Oh my gosh, what a day we're having. I was finally able to find it. I had to go in and out a few times. Oh yeah, it's been too long since Cory put out a new episode. Oh, everyone's excited about you putting out a new episode, by the way.
Yeah, well, we have one backlogged before this. It's just we're a bit slow about getting them. And they're on Spotify way long before they're on YouTube. Like, it takes like 2 months after we get them, if that, maybe even more, between getting them on Spotify. Usually it takes about a month from Spotify. We have a very small team. So
I mean, it's just the two of you, right? It's just you and your tech guy.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Mm.
And he has his own podcast where he does like fantasy football analysis. So he's
nobody wants that.
Well, that has a lot more views than ours. So
I mean, you're probably right, but well, you know, we can just shit on them and say that it's a comment on how people don't actually appreciate the philosophy and psychology of the modern day.
Yes, but well, I did a crossover episode where I went on and talked about the occults of football. But anyhow, that's another story.
Sure.
I'm not seeing a video of you, which is fine. But is there a live recording?
Yes, there is a live, and they say the sound is good. Here.
And they can see both of us.
Yep, they can see both of us.
Okay.
But because my video is being sent to YouTube, I can't also send my video to you on Riverside. So
that's fine. But it still shows me talking to you.
Yes. Yeah. It shows both. What a weird digital age we live in, man.
All right. Yeah.
No, we got it. Yeah. See? That's you, that's me currently.
Okay.
Not bad. Well, okay, so we're here for Dream Class. God, it's been a while since we've had Dream Class, and I'm very excited to be bringing it back because I'm now back from paternity leave. I'm kind of back in the saddle of things, and some people have wanted Dream Class back, and I'm very excited to bring it back. And so, well, who better to have on as one of the first guests than Cory Banta? If you haven't checked out his podcast, The 50-Minute Hour, you got to check it out. We just recorded an episode right before this, which I think will be very fun to watch. So, Cory, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah. What do you got? What are you smoking there?
I have hookah with some mint, watermelon, blueberry shisha, and I have my bullet bourbon.
Not bad. I had a vodka Sprite with you, and I've realized I need to lay off that if I'm going to have any kind of coherent conversation. So I'm back to water again.
Okay, I get better, as I drink, but
I get stupider as I drink. my words are less well formed. Not good. Well, so today, I made a bunch of videos. I made several videos on the topic of liminal spaces. And liminal spaces and the topic of sleep paralysis kind of seem to go hand in hand. There have been a lot of things that I've seen that kind of come across my feed where they talk about how liminal spaces, sleep paralysis, astral projection, and lucid dreaming, they're all kind of in this like category. And the spiritual side of TikTok really believes that lucid dreaming They call it astral projection. I call it lucid dreaming, because lucid dreaming has been researched and kind of scientifically understood. Astral projection is, to me, it feels like the spiritual terminology for the same kind of concept. And they believe that astral projection is a way to leave your body, exit your body, and kind of transcend into the metaphysical realm, or even to alternate universes, do your business, find out some information, and then when you wake back up, you kind of come back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I appreciate that, but I don't think it's very scientific, and I don't think it's really, really supported. I think by looking at liminal spaces and lucid dreaming, there's some really, really cool things that you can do, and by making it spiritual, I feel that it strikes a lot of fear into people, and they get worried about all these different things, and they kind of lose out on some of the therapeutic benefits. So I don't know. I'm not really asking a question, but I'm bringing up the topic in general. Do you have any personal thoughts, feelings, or opinions on kind of this category of topics: astral projection, liminal spaces, lucid dreaming?
Yeah, I'm not dogmatic either way. I will say there's this huge tradition, especially in the East, but in the West is to some degree. And in the East, it's more tied in with, let's say, Orthodox spiritual practices. In the West, it's more esoteric or on the edge, or quote unquote left hand path, unorthodox to do these things, where it's integrated into the spirituality in the East. And I will say that, taking these at face value, these documents or writings we have from things like Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Egyptian occult mysteries involving bridging over into what will be termed in New Age phenomenon as the astral realm, there seems to be a marked difference in the sort of objectiveness of what you are observing in astral projection per se. Again, astral projection is this very modern term, but I'll just run with it.
Do they have a different term they call it? Like, is there a correct terminology
everywhere.
for them?
Usually it's very integrated into the actual spiritual practice. So you're going into the bardo, or they don't see it as like something you're doing that is its own exercise. It's sort of a part and parcel of prayer life. And
that is sleeping. Like, they'll go to sleep and
sometimes.
Sometimes, and they'll have. Oh, so I guess sometimes it could be sort of like a meditative state where you leave your body as well. Yes. Okay. So
and it might surprise people that even Christianity has this actually, and you'll find explicit references to it in old church fathers, usually monastic, because the idea is that if you're a monk, your prayer life is so intense that all this crazy shit is happening to you, including what from modern eyes would look like astral projection, just accidentally, like not on purpose, during intense prayer. And again, the West is usually more skeptical, and not of it happening, but the nature of it. Like and they talk about things that would be seen on a different level as lucid dreaming. So they seem to have a working idea of a difference here. And I'll say in the literature, the comparative literature of it, the difference would be, again, taking these things at face value, this objective reality that is occurring in astral projection, whereas lucid dreaming is subjective reality. Now, what you will see, some more contemporary spiritual thinkers commenting on these things will say is that they're both entering the same realm, but in sleep, or what we'll say as lucid dreaming, it's basically totally worse shock. It's totally subjective. Everything you're seeing might exist in the astral plane there, but it's totally subjective to your psyche, like anything in a dream would be.
Whereas if I would be more of that opinion.
Yes. And astral projection, these things, again, it depends on which spiritual tradition you're looking at.
True.
In the astral realm, if your astral projection, intentionally or not, in prayer or meditation, you're interacting with beings that are actually there, just as much in lucid dreaming. But although they might still be deceptive, you're working with a more objective reality. And by extension, if you have an outer body experience or near-death experience and you astral project in that moment, if you exit the walls of the hospital or wherever it is you're dying or having this experience or meditating or praying, you can see something that you have no formal knowledge of being there, come back to your body and report to doctors, scientists. There's a lot of interesting contemporary research on this with near-death experiences that you'll actually report being there objectively that you couldn't or probably don't in lucid dreaming.
And so that's what really kind of confuses me, and I don't have a solid explanation of. Here, I'm going to do something. Just try this out real quick. switch that. Oh, I didn't do it. That's okay. That would be kind of the part that I don't have a great explanation for, because sometimes people are able to say, like, I saw something, or there was something like objective that they can say, here's a bit of information that I brought back from this experience that is at least very difficult, maybe impossible to explain how you might have gotten that information in any other way. Right. I mean, maybe an educated guess, or maybe good kind of estimation, but that's really where I struggle to kind of explain. And it's a good criticism of like the science and research right now. It doesn't have a great explanation for how people would know these things that otherwise they really have no explanation for knowing. So it's to be determined. But at least my experience is every time they try and replicate this stuff, or they try and have a good scientific study on it, they can never replicate the results. It's just these one-off sort of like, so the criticism is like, is it just observer bias, or is it just like I don't know, like bias?
There's some very funny research in the 60s where 50s and 60s where the FBI, various alphabet organizations got very interested in this kind of stuff. And, they'll have limited release where they release research documents like 60 years. And about 5 or so years ago, they released some of these documents. This was like the height of New Age 60 stuff. It was everywhere. And they actually hired some of these people who had outer body experiences sort of on command. And these documents are so funny to read because it's like very official FBI documents talking to this, seemingly crazy lady about what she's seeing on Mars through astral projection.
Right. It's
so
like, what?
You have this. Yeah, you have this, and then you look at these, these stories or these documents of generals in ancient China doing the same thing for very apparently valuable information, military information on the opponent's camp layout.
So, like psyops kind of stuff.
Yeah, so there's a whole history of this stuff. Maybe it's all made up, maybe it's all suggestion, but even taking it again at face value or taking it as woo-woo, there does seem to be at least a conceptual working where there is a divide between the what you're doing in a dreamscape and what you're doing, again, maybe not intentionally but usually intentionally, in astral projection.
Yeah Okay, so some good questions in the chat here. Good questions in the chat. One is, sir, did you bring cakes for everybody? Because you can't see me, but I'm eating a cookie right now. But then an actual question of someone said, but like lucid dreaming, you're actually asleep. Isn't daydreaming or meditative states like being in the liminal space before that? You got any thoughts about it?
I mean, I would say there's definitely overlap. But again, what seems marked in lucid dreaming, and people maybe have different experiences of this, but from the literature I've read, is that the difference between a daydream putting you into the astral realm is there's not as much psychic mediation on your part interfering with what you're seeing. So you're, let's say, maybe not impossible, but it's much less likely, again, reading these things at face value, that you're going to experience something about the objective outside world in this liminal state between the astral realm and this realm in a lucid dream. In a lucid dream, you might go out of your house and see all this fantastic stuff, and you'd be like, oh, I want to fly now, or I want this tree to be here. When you wake up and go outside, none of that's going to be there. And these astral projection stuff, the idea is that, a lot of this is stuff you wouldn't see in the outside world if you left your room. But were you to, you'll probably see a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah, so you're kind of making a distinction between astral projection and lucid dreaming. Like astral projection is you're seeing the objective world in a way that is maybe difficult to physically explain. You're kind of like beyond the limitations of your physical abilities. Lucid dreaming is just like a Rorschach. You're interacting actively with your own psyche.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of layers to this. Both sides, according to this literature, are in some way actually dealing with what might be called a spiritual world, or in Platonic terms, a world above the divided line of the everyday seeming flux reality. So it's just with the lucid dreaming, you have a lot, I don't want to say garbage, but psychic interference from your own psyche that is making it more difficult to work with objective reality, rather that's this world we interact with our senses in everyday life, or the spiritual world, or the astral plane, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
In a way that there is a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I guess I'm of the opinion, and it's hard to say, right? Like, there's a lot of tradition for it, and there's a lot of like really interesting things that people can do. I guess I'm of the opinion that I think human beings have a huge part of themselves that is intensely relational, right? And so I think human beings are, in some ways, kind of this big organism, and we can see that, like when we talk about attachment theory or relationship dynamics or psychology, like it's almost like once you have a connection and a relationship with a person, that person kind of lives inside your psyche because you connected with them. And maybe there's the theory that you're connected with all other human beings, right? We're all kind of connected in that way because we're so intensely relational. So my thought has been, and this, I don't have a great reason to support this, it's just my working theory, but it's like if you're connecting with the quote unquote astral realm, you're just connecting with your emotional relational senses, right? You're able to sense that stuff. And because your critical brain is out of the way, maybe you can sense and perceive that relational, I don't know, that relational radar a little bit more accurately than you can while you're awake. All right. Okay, so another question here. One says, I have a bone to pick with you, sir. I think talking about me. All the times I've told you all my remembered dreams were right when I either go to sleep. Oh, they were right when I either go to sleep or wake up, and you never told me about liminal dreams. I don't know. I think liminal dreams, I don't know if I'm using that term right. Liminal dreams. Okay, two things. There's liminal spaces, right? There's lucid dreams. Those are two different things. And we'll get to liminal spaces in a second. But it is very common for people to remember their dreams right when they fall asleep and right when they wake up, because those are kind of those moments, at least I feel, those are those moments when the two hemispheres of the brain are the most connected, because the thinking part of the brain hasn't totally shut off. And, the thinking part of the brain is starting to reignite as you're waking up. So it's most likely that you're going to remember those dreams you have right before awakening, if you're going to remember any dreams, because it is difficult to remember your dreams. The brain's not really set up to remember them. It takes practice. So I don't know if that's what you mean, Raylan, when you say that, but I just thought I'd address it. And then a second question, you can't talk to your inner mind awake, ? Isn't that hypnosis and daydream? Or are you only talking about these outside objects? You can't talk to your inner mind awake. I think you can talk to your inner mind awake. I think that would be hypnosis. Absolutely.
Yeah, among other things.
Yeah, well, true. Meditation's a way to do it. I mean, I think like art and literature are a way to do it too. You kind of experience what your emotional reaction is to something, and that tells you a little bit about yourself. Yeah. I think we're talking about like, where's the line between science and spirituality, right? It's like science can't give a good explanation. Spirituality can. They're like, yeah, you're part of the multiverse, baby. You're experiencing it. Science is like, well, I'm not sure though. Yeah, not sure.
And even then, that's so conjoined to a very modern scientific theory too.
Yeah.
In a way that these ancient classical people didn't have a similar concept to.
Yeah, true. Well,
I mean, this was Jung's great project was finding that way to integrate the spiritual and the scientific side. So it's a monumental task. It's sort of the modern Promethean philosopher's stone.
Yeah. Well, it's going to take a while. It's a big task to accomplish for sure. Someone says, "Oh, that makes so much sense. Why those are the dreams we most remember." Oh yeah, falling asleep and waking up. So let me talk for a minute. We'll shift topics briefly here about liminal spaces. There was, and let me see if I can find this over on YouTube. I wonder if will it let me share my screen here, because that would be kind of cool. Oh yes. Okay, check this out. All right, so I recently. Can you see that, Cory?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Hey,
yeah,
okay, that's
YouTube,
cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So I recently came across this game maker called Subliminal, and so they're making this video game. It's all about liminal spaces, and it's just absolutely fascinating. It's very cool, and it's supposed to come out this summer. And so I'm a part of their Discord. I've been talking with them. I applied to be, part of their media team to maybe promote the game or play through it when it comes out. But it's all about liminal spaces. So I'm going to play this here just so you can
Showing
see
up on the first page of Google.
what it's kind of about. Does it let you hear the audio too, Cory?
Yeah.
That's great. It looks horrifying.
It reminds me of Stalker, the film, Tarkovsky.
Oh, yeah. Ooh. I'm very excited about it. I'm also a little bit hesitant too, because I'm not a horror person. so if I have to play this game,
You
I'm gonna be
could
shitting
buy
my
a
pants
ZenBook
the
Duo,
whole
a
time.
super cool dual screen laptop.
I grew
or
up with horror.
for a third of the
My
price,
mother and her
you
boyfriend
could
at
buy
the time,
the.
they played a
Oh,
lot
wait.
of horror
Sorry, say it
games.
again.
I
It was playing in the background.
Resident Evil when I was 7, or 5, I think, on PlayStation, the first PlayStation. So
Yeah.
So I said, yeah.
Is that Alex on the side?
Yeah.
What's he saying?
He said it's why I'm so fucked up.
I'm just in the corner commenting little remarks.
It's great. It's great. So it all plays, but the whole game plays on this dream concept of a liminal space. And so that's kind of what I wanted to like touch on briefly and maybe ask some questions about in the chat if you're interested. A liminal space for me, the way that I kind of describe it is a liminal space is a space that takes away your reference points. So if you look at some of those images, and the reason that some of them are so terrifying is because all of your reference points are gone. You know, usually we know where the ground is or where the sky is or where the horizon is. And these are some of the like different reference points. You know, we can see when we walk into a room, we're pretty familiar with, you know, where you put the chairs and the couch and the ceiling fan and all this stuff. But when you start to take some of those things away and you make it this eerie place between what is and what is to come, like there's almost like this anticipation that happens in these spaces, like something's uncompleted, it's unfinished. It really leaves a person feeling unsettled. And there's 2 points that I kind of want to make about that. One is that can be a very intensely spiritual experience. And what I mean by spiritual experience is, I mean it can be positively, emotionally transformative. Right? Well, I mean, it could also be negative too, but we'll stick with the positive anyway. And then the second piece is, this is the reason it happens in dreams so much is this is the whole principle of what makes dreams so fascinating and powerful. When you go to sleep, your brain is synthesizing the information of what you experienced that day and trying to make connections and predictions about how it can use that information so you can be smarter, better, faster, stronger tomorrow. So when you are sleeping, it is, I think, a liminal space. When you are asleep, you are in this space between what you were yesterday and what you will be tomorrow. And that is both beautiful, fascinating, and terrifying all at the same time. And so I'm very excited about this game, and I'm very excited about all the conversation that's happening about like the back rooms and like these water rooms and stuff, because it's entertaining. But what's cool about it is it's entertaining in a way that I think is bringing understanding and awareness to some of these mental health developmental pieces that I talk about so much. Not much of a question, but I don't know. What do you think about it?
Well, I think there's an aspect of what we see with liminal spaces and the sort of social obsession in the past 2 or 3 years. I think since Vaporwave really came out in 2016.
Good point.
But particularly the past year or two, there's been this internet sensation with it. One is de-anthropocentric. It's de-anthropocentrizing. So it's taking the meta-narrative.
Yes,
I'm going to explain it.
Okay, all right, cool.
It's taking the narrative that humans are the center of society and culture and reality and putting it outward, away from humans. Now, my point is this has always been a theme in art, especially Near East Asian art. You see a lot of scenes. If humans are in it at all, they're totally eclipsed by the grandiosity of nature. And a lot of Eastern philosophies tend to follow this. Whereas in the West, obviously because of Christianity, God becomes man, man can become God, as St. Athanasius says. There's a very theoanthropocentric narrative. And there's this tension between the human and what is not human. So on one hand, we're saying in the West, the philosophical theological trajectory is that man is the center of nature. He is the king over nature, as Adam is in the garden. And yet God has all these very strange creations that don't seem very human. Something like a platypus, something like a parasite, something that seems not only evil, but totally like some psychopath designed it in nature. So the West has always struggled between this narrative of sort of a Promethean figure.
Yeah.
I know scholars like Jason Giorgiani have talked a lot about this. Nietzsche sort of comments on this, there's this, despite how much man tries to make himself the center of the universe, he just keeps getting flipped out. Darwin, Copernicus, Freud keep decentering man. And because the West, and as a society, as a culture, as a theology, and our own individual psychology reflecting that, we've become so self-centered, we've become so human-centered.
Yeah.
The reason these liminal spaces are both comforting to some and terrifying to others is because it's decentering us from that narrative. And that's scary for some and comforting for others. The other thing that's particular in our era is that a lot of people that seem to be affected by this are millennials or Gen Xers, and especially Americans. And I think it's because a lot of these liminal spaces you see, like broken down malls, Blockbuster studios, they're things that remind us of a certain level of nostalgia. So we have this nostalgic feeling. I think Mark Fisher talks about this with ontology, this feeling that capitalist realism, we can't escape capitalism. Zizek says that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. So in that respect, it's combined with this sense of deterioration of something that was in our past, and therefore can be very welcoming, because we're not only leaving the anthropocentric scene, the human-centered scene, but we're leaving something as an alternative to what we feel trapped by. And I think millennials, more so than past generations, have been sensitive to this, but I see it in Zoomers as well. Particular sensitivity that there's a certain nightmarish aspect to what we've designed in the West, and now it's inescapable.
Yeah. Do you think that nightmarish aspect is what they play on in these liminal spaces, or do you think that's why like the Zoomers feel comfortable in liminal spaces, because it gets away from?
Yeah, I think it's why they find it comforting. And again, it's
because I
also
find it horrifying.
Well, maybe it's horrifying too, because it is decentering us from our human. It's like Lovecraft, right? It's like not only are we not the center, but we're totally antecedent. We're totally secondary, tertiary, even basically just meaningless life forms that have no teleology or purpose. And at least in the aspect that's playing off this in more classical painting, like the Chinese paintings I'm talking about, it's like man still has a cohesive, almost Taoist-like existence in respect to nature. Like think of the elves in Tolkien, right?
Okay.
What you're seeing in modern liminal space art is not even this narrative. It's totally decentered from man. It's much more in the vein of Lovecraft, where man is like an accident. But now it's totally out of context because he's built all these structures and temples to capitalism, like malls or whatever, or Blockbuster. And it's like being a pagan. Yes, it's like being a pagan Roman looking at, third, fourth century Rome and just seeing all your pagan temples converted into Christian temples or just destroyed. It's like there is something I have a connection to here almost spiritually through capitalism, through consumerism, that is now annihilated. And for some people, that's very comforting, but it's also conjoined with this feeling of being decentered from humanness and not being important.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. And there's a couple comments here that I want to read, because I think we're kind of coming to the connection between each person's personal psychology and the experience of a liminal space. So let me read this. Someone says, why wouldn't that be more like a threshold than a space with no reference points? And I think it's a good question. I think that's what a liminal space really is. It's like walking across a threshold, like a front door, or like crossing a bridge. But instead of, hold on. It's like walking across a bridge or stepping across a front door. But when you're stepping across a front door or walking across a bridge, you have the reference points of where I started, one side of the bridge, and the other side of the bridge. What if you took those reference points away and you were just on this bridge that didn't have a beginning or an end? That's a liminal space. And so I think it's the idea of taking a threshold and expanding it to where it eclipses the reference points of the beginning and the end. And that's really what takes the threshold and makes it into a space? So I think that's a great question. Would you agree with that, or would you add anything to it?
Can you just repeat the question quickly? I want to make sure I get it right.
Sure. It's why wouldn't that be more like a threshold than a space with no reference points?
I mean, I just say why not both? And I think this is a part of the uncanniness, is that it's this paradoxical nature of liminal spaces that again can cause conflict, inner conflict, but also a sense of freedom that we don't have to be tied down to these things. As a lot of great art, and I don't know if I'm going to call liminal spaces great art, but it's both, the phrase is comforting to the discomforted and discomforting to the comforted, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's my favorite t-shirt company puts that on all their stuff. Disturbing the comfortable, comforting the disturbed. I was like, I love that. I love that. So the conversation in the chat has kind of gone on to say, I asked, she said, me who loves being decentered. Haha. I said, so do you like liminal spaces? And they responded, depends on the definition. Open, creepy space. That's what my mind looks like. So if that, then yes, which has caused me to think now, because a lot of the way that I grew up, a lot of my experiences in my childhood were very much based on, I'm the oldest, I'm the firstborn. And so it was all about like, being productive and getting good grades and showing and creating something that helps people be better and makes the world better. So it's like all about being productive and like being a valuable member of society. So a lot of who I am and my identity is really attached to, I want to build something beautiful and make the world a better place. I had a very difficult time on paternity leave because I was taken away from my work and I had to just exist and enjoy being with my wife and my son, which I did. But at the same time, it was immensely uncomfortable, not because I don't love my wife and my son, but because my natural reference points are being productive. And so if you take away my ability to be quote unquote Western productive, I become immensely uncomfortable. So for me, liminal spaces create the same experience where I want to know where I started and where I'm going. Liminal spaces, by definition, take that away. So I become uncomfortable because I kind of, in order to feel okay with myself, and this is part of my own psychology, my own work with my therapist and stuff like that, in order to feel comfortable with myself, I need to be able to show that I'm making progress. So when you put me in a liminal space, I become immensely uncomfortable because it's like you destroyed my personality.
It's destroyed any sense of what philosophers would say is teleology. There's no purpose or ends to what you're doing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. If you want to talk about a mortal fear, I mean, there could be the boogeyman chasing me. I could be in a horror movie. It could be a giant spider about to bite me. Nothing is as intensely terrifying as destroying my teleology. Oh my God.
Yeah,
That's my millennial
Spinoza
gripe.
is your boogeyman.
Spinoza's my boogeyman. It's a great way to put it. Reading the comments here, says if we're thresholdy, maybe that too, since that's just a potential, kind of commenting on what you said before. But okay, Julie chimes in, says, well, I have to go to work. I wish I could stay and listen because it's very interesting. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for joining, Julie. Appreciate you being here. And then someone else says hashtag no direction instead of one direction.
Oh, I see.
Hashtag no direction. So I don't know. So for you personally, Cory, do you find liminal spaces kind of scary, or do you find them kind of quietly comforting? How do you experience them?
Both. I actually had a recurring childhood dream that was incredibly liminal space.
Oh.
I had an idea that I was suddenly without my mother, and I'm in this very womb-like, mall-like structure that's all it's like a platform that's white squares with water on the edges, and then there's very little like between the squares and the water, and then it's like a giant room that's a cube that is just like lights, like overhead mall lights, and it's just this giant cube. The thing I've seen most similar to it was in the sequel to Blade Runner 2000 whatever, and there's a scene where he meets like the designer of the AI. This scene was done much better in the first one in my opinion, but that room, I don't know if you'll be able to look it up or not, but that room looks very similar to this in my dream. And that aspect was terrifying because I think for me it was a very Oedipal thing. It's like having to progress from a pure Eternus to Cynics and maturing, being without my mother, like this fear that when my mom would take me to the mall a lot, and it was like this fear that I would lose her. And also therefore have to go beyond the womb of my mother. And so I'm displacing that with a new womb. But it was this womb of like capitalism, like the mall was now my new womb. It's like this fear that I have to go out in the world and become a productive capitalist or whatever. And
I'm not sure.
so
Would it be this image? Is this
sort of like that? But I remember it.
This is the newer Blade Runner, I think.
Yeah, I remember it kind of differently. It's not in the old. There's no liminal spaces in the old Blade Runner. The new Blade Runner is full of it, but this one in particular stood out to me. I don't think it was exactly like that, but that's close. It was much bigger than this in the dream. I'm a huge fan of the first Blade Runner. I'm not too keen on the second, but it had some nice aesthetics.
Oh yeah, look at these liminal spaces. Woo.
Yeah.
Like that. Wow. No reference points. Very dystopian. Or like that. And that's a great example of a liminal space.
Yes. Yeah, I'm still not seeing it here, but I mean, people, I'm sure they have a rough idea of it. But that aspect of it to me is terrifying because it's like independence, and it's the fact that not only is it you're not centered in the universe, but even in this fantasy life you've created for yourself, you're not even be able to have security in that. It's just total insecurity everywhere. On the other hand, I really like these liminal spaces that, again, I think they're playing on the psychological theme that you see in East Asian art, where man has some sort of unity with nature, and therefore he's decentered, but in a comforting way. I think liminal spaces do that, but nature has been replaced with sort of the temples of mammon, the temples of capitalism. But even that, again, there's a nostalgia because I grew up in the 90s. So that part to me is comforting.
Yeah.
But I'll just say I find the East Asian liminal nature spaces, or even the Romanticist paintings in Europe, much more comforting, because it's like I'm fine with being de-anthropocized, but I want to be de-anthropocized in respect to something greater, not a nihilistic de-anthropization.
I would agree. I think like there's a comfort in being a part of something bigger. That's a great point. Hold on. Let me develop this thought for like a second. There's this comforting experience of being a part of something bigger than yourself. I think it's why people like go to the mountains or go to the ocean, because it's like, wow, okay, I have anxiety and stress and depression or problems, but it puts it in perspective when I lay on the ground and look up at the stars and realize how big the universe is, or I sit on the beach and I throw rocks into the ocean and realize how big the world is. It kind of is grounding, and it reminds me and puts into context or puts into perspective the things that I'm struggling with. But when we talk about like a capitalistic liminal space, it's almost like man falling within himself, and so there's no comfort of the great like Earth Mother or Mother Nature. That's gone, and I've fallen within myself, and there's no reference points of myself. It's like when you open, like we did just here. It's like when you open a window and broadcast the window, and it just has infinite windows going down into nothingness. It's like that, but inside my own head, which is horrifying. It's like I'm going to be trapped inside the straight jacket and, institution that is my own brain. And that's horrific.
And again, I think another part of the comforting aspect with liminal spaces and contemporary stuff is this thing Zizek and Mark Fisher was talking about, that we can only imagine the end of capitalism with like whatever we show in films, like a meteor hitting the world or zombie apocalypse. This gives something a bit more nice, like a nice way to exit existence, just the deterioration of human man-made structures to the point where they exist, but man has been annihilated. So it's like a plausible way to imagine the end of the world that's not horrifying like a zombie apocalypse or something.
Yeah, and I like how you said that. Like, it's easier for us to imagine like some meteor hitting the Earth or something like that, rather than being able to imagine like capitalism ceasing to exist. Like, I can't do it. I can't imagine what that would be like. It's like, I'd really have to sit and think about it. I can imagine meteor hits the Earth, nuclear explosion, whatever. Like, yeah, I got that. I can fantasize about that. But like the end of capitalism, I don't know, man. I grew up in the 90s too. I don't, it's so much a part of my culture and the nature that has shaped my personality. I don't know if I can conceive myself outside of that.
I think this is the same reason that in the past 3 or 4 years, I know they even have like a Netflix thing on it now. Ted Kaczynski has gotten so popular with the youth is because he actually is envisioning a very plausible and still anthropocentric way that man can escape it. Dismantling industrialism, blah blah blah. So I think the similar reason that liminal spaces have that appeal.
Oh yeah, like John Krasinski, like Jim from The Office. Well, what movies are you thinking of? Like, are you talking about like his movies that he makes? Have kind of imagined
no,
it?
he's not a director. I'm talking about the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, Ted Kaczynski. I thought you meant John Krasinski, Jim Halpert from The Office.
No,
no, different person. The Unabomber. No, not Jim.
I don't know about Jim talking about dismantling industrialism.
I was like, wow, I missed that episode. It was a little deep for The Office. Ashley over on YouTube says, every time I listen to you and Cory talk, I never comment because it's always such an interesting conversation. Just wanted y'all to know I'm still here and enjoying the conversation. And then someone else says, just hang out with Joy and Ollie at the beach. Yeah, that would be good for my mental health. Someone else says, I think ethical capitalism is fine. The disgusting thing we have now should go, though. Do you got any thoughts about, that's a topic. Thoughts about capitalism in general?
Well, I think people misunderstand a lot what is meant by capitalism. So I'm not talking about more or less the historical way people have done commerce throughout history, which is exchange of value. You work, you get land, you have private property.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
By capitalism, I mean a very specific event that's about 150, 200 years old that rose because of industrialism and caused a market psychological disturbance in how people relate to what they do own and to each other. So I'm not talking about the exchange of value and goods and people working hard to earn their keep. That's what I think a lot of Americans, mean by capitalism. That's not what I mean. I mean a more critical theory view of capitalism, which is the specific tie into industrialism where people are, again, I'm not a Marxist. I'm not saying we need to rile the class warfare. That's not my point. Right. I think hierarchies are natural. I think hierarchies are they're inevitable. My point is that class warfare will always be here. My point is that you can have all that without the industrial abstraction that happens in products and the relationship. Like a blacksmith for most of history, feeling a sense of ownership in this tool he has produced that the farmer buys and uses for his crops that he feels a sense of ownership for. That is what I'm talking about. That is alienated in capitalism.
Jefferson said the American dream was destroyed with the steam engine.
Did you hear that? Were you able to hear it?
No, almost. Repeat it again. Here, come on over. Come on over.
Yeah, come over.
Sorry, I'm like sitting here in the corner just listening in.
I love it. Do you often sit in the corners and watch other people have fun?
I am. I'm very much the corner sitter. I just listen to everyone talk. No, Jefferson said that the end of the American dream, I don't know if he used that exact terminology, but was basically the end of the American system was the invention of the steam engine. Because for him, the ideal American system, it was a very, small communities acting independently and very self-governing. It was very against any of the founding fathers would be very against our federal system today, but especially Jefferson. It was like very small communities. And what he saw towards the end of his life, sadly for him, was the invention of the steam engine. And suddenly all of commerce was not localized anymore. It was extreme. There was always, shipping, and there was the East India Trading Company, all that. But the steam engine just had commerce completely break down from individual communities, sort of what Cory's talking about, like the blacksmith making the tools that he sees go into the community to raise the crops for that was all gone.
That's a great
point. And it's like this whole ideal that, I have worked my entire life to set up of the American system of this sort of self-governing small communities who would be their own selves is gone now.
It's so big. We're so connected.
It's all connected. It's all commerce. It's all nationalized. And it's because it's all nationalized, it's all played into the federalist system. So that everything we work for is basically gone. And Jefferson kind of realized that towards the very end of his life.
I think Lincoln too, because he said the ideal with the American living day-to-day life is that you move when you see the smoke of your neighbor's chimney. So I think
now we're on top of each other.
Yeah,
Right.
I think the founding fathers, as intelligent as they were, they had this very naive view that they could set up this democratic system. I'm very much a Platonist here, and that it would just work out in their ideal, where people still have all this ownership of their land and their property, and every, obviously not slaves, but excluding them, right? At least as an ideal. And I think the common man, when greed enters it and all this other stuff, it's too much freedom to the point of disease, as Plato would say.
Yeah. Well, one of the commenters says, I think ethical capitalism is fine. The disgusting thing we have now should go, though. That's what I'm talking about too. Charging $100,000 for something you stole a patent for medicine because you want to profit from hurting people.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we've got these giant companies and corporations that are not connected with the local community. And so there's this, like, I don't know, whatever you want, decentralized problem that we have where, it's not just like the local blacksmith makes something for the local farmer and the local farmer makes some grain that then the blacksmith buys. And it's this nice, like, little community. And it's there's both like a mutual help, but a mutually assured destruction. Like, I don't want to fuck over the blacksmith because he makes my tools, right? And the blacksmith doesn't want to pull one over on the farmer because I'm going to need his grain in the future too. So it, like, there's almost this this cooperation that ensures continuance. And if little old me gets fucked over by Apple or Netflix or Pfizer, they don't give a shit. So that's the problem.
I don't want to do too much into economic critique. To bring it back to liminal spaces,
sure.
There was something I really wanted to talk about in regards to this, which was sort of the ancient history of liminal spaces and how they were actually intentionally designed into spiritual life. Can I talk about this?
Yeah, let's do that, and we'll wrap it up on that topic.
Okay, so I want to say two things. So first off is that, and I sent you a link to a journal article. This is a peer-reviewed published article that some anthropologists will talk about, which is that a lot of anthropology from the 1900s until quite recently, focusing on spiritual worship and Mesoamerican temples, or Greek temples, Levant temples, classical Greek temples, Babylonian temples, ancient Near East temples, basically. They focus on a lot of what's called the theocentric middle part of the temple, which is the center of the temple. That's where the great sacrifices happen. But recently, anthropologists have been turning their attention to what are called the liminal spaces of the temple, which are the porticles. I think on the last thing we did, I mentioned the Asclepiads and their temple with the dreams.
Yeah.
And you would lie on the portico. That would be an example of a liminal worship space. And recently, anthropologists have been turning their attention.
What can I Google to find that? What did you call that again?
Liminal spaces and temple architecture. I sent you a link in the Discord.
In the Discord?
To an article.
A direct link to me?
Yeah. I sent you a link about one of the articles I would be talking about. I think you need some sort of access to it, but you can look at the abstract, and that does a lot of justice. And so basically, this has been a trend in recent anthropology, which is very good, I think, that had been spending more attention looking at these spaces that so much material was put into building these temples. Wasn't just the theocentric aspect of the temple, but the anthropocentric. And that is to say, it's not like we're worshiping a human, but it's that this is, even in modern Catholic, you have the whole altar with the candles, the Eucharist, but then on the side you have all these saints. And what's occurring between the saint and the worshiper is something more personal to them. It's like you need a very specific prayer, right? So you go to the saint. This was very much the pagan idea, right? So you have to do your sacrifices to Zeus or the Sky Father or whatever, but then there's these side gods that take care of more personal transformation. And these were called the liminal spaces in a temple. And which is to say, again, like the portico with Asclepiads, this is where, so you have your personal, you have your whole thing, you offer a cock to Asclepius, as Socrates says, but then you go on the portico and you have your dreams interpreted. And that's an anthropocentric transformation that occurs on the porch, the liminal space of the temple. What's interesting is that these Mesoamerican, Egyptian, Near East, Levant temples, by contemporary standards, some of them have a very liminal space looking aspect to them. Now, this is where I'm going to get mythological. So I'm not saying take this as a historical fact, but I'm going to tell
let me pause you there for a second. So someone, just for clarification, someone asks, isn't the whole temple always a liminal space, the space between you and God?
Yes and no. So it's a liminal space in the sense that this is where man and God meets.
Okay.
Yes. In that sense, yes. But it's not liminal in the sense that there's a immediate satisfaction in the ritual that is performed theocentrically. So the liminal aspect is originally this term was mostly used in magic and ritual and religious spiritual meaning.
Yeah.
With the space in between, it comes from a Latin meaning. And so the idea is like these are rituals performed that occur over a long period of time for personal transformation. So in that respect, the center of the temple is not so much a liminal space. That is where you do a ritual and it gets done, complete.
Yeah. Beginning and end. There's like,
yes.
Start and completion.
Whereas at the edges, and the architecture reflects this, there's a feeling of incompleteness or being in between spaces, not in the contemporary sense where there's a total lack of context. There's a very obvious teleology or purpose to what's happening here. But they're a bit more long-term. And again, they're focused more on the personal transformation of the worshiper, of the believer, than they are whatever sacrifices someone owes to the god. So in this respect, again, it is and isn't a liminal space altogether. But there is a particular way in which the edges, the liminal architecture, is liminal in the actual ritual being performed.
Yeah, I'm going to share something with you because I think this is a little bit of kind of like what you mean. I know this is a little small, but let me see if I blow it up.
Yeah.
It's like you see how it goes. I put this so YouTube can see it too. It's like this it's a liminal space. It's like it feels like it goes on forever. You feel very small. It's very repetitive, and so you kind of get lost in it. But this is the outside of the temple. The stuff happens in here, and then here's another kind of example of it. These big walls, and it curves around, which I think the curve is beautiful because you can't really see where the end is or where the beginning is. You just kind of like are in this liminal space of forever but not yet, which is really kind of interesting.
And the idea is that in the theocentric core of the temple, you would not really get that liminal feeling. And in general, I don't think you do.
Yeah, not as much. I mean, maybe some, would have some elements that create this, decentralized feeling or kind of out of body experience. So you can have a spiritual, experience, but you'll really, really partake in it in those edge experiences, those outside places, the porch, like you were saying.
Yes. So now going to the myth I'm going to tell, I'm going to connect this to what's happening with all these 90s nostalgic liminal spaces that's happening sort of unconsciously in the architecture.
Okay, yeah.
So Plato tells a myth in the Critias and the Timaeus about Atlantis. This is where we get the idea of Atlantis. Some other Greek historians talk about it a bit, but it's really Plato who seals the deal. Yeah. And people today debate whether or not Plato's being facetious. Is he telling a myth? Is he telling history? But again, take this as myth. Basically, Atlantis is this great city with very intense technology, advanced spirituality. They build these huge temples, and then they disappear. They flood. Something happens. They went to war with Athens, and then they flood for their hubris. It's like God's punishment, not unlike the flood in the Old Testament. And so now there's this weird similarity. So it's like off the coast of Europe towards the west in the Atlantic Ocean, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you see these weird similarities. And there's modern contemporary archaeology debates about why this is, but there's all these weird similarities between temples in Mesoamerica and temples in ancient Egypt and the Near East and the Levant. And again, take this as a myth, right? The Atlanteans, their temples, everything get destroyed. So they go outward, east and west to all these other continents, and they try to rebuild these temples they had. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying taking this literally, but just run with this as a thought experiment.
Okay.
The way that their priests are trying to connect to each other, they know that not everyone ended up in the same continent. So they build these temples that remind them of Atlantis, but they're temples that are designed intentionally with liminal spaces in the architecture, because the liminal space acts as a psychological magnet for, going back to our earlier discussion, meeting in the astral realm. You'll see this also in some Native American cultures where they'll do peyote together, and then they smoke tobacco to talk about their collective experience. And what they'll tell you is that they're experiencing more or less the same thing in the astral realm, but it's hard for them to talk while they're on the peyote. So the tobacco helps them come back down for a bit to discuss this shared relation. Basically, the idea being that these temples were designed to operate as magnified spaces for psychic interaction in long distances. So kind of an ancient spiritual telephone. Again, not saying to take this literally, but at least as a psychological way.
Yeah.
Right? I'm using a myth to tell a psychological tale. So in that same way, we know we've killed all our gods. God is dead. Nietzsche, blah, blah, blah. Mammon's our new god, capitalism, whatever. Even if we want to be a secular society that builds strip malls, we can't but help maintain this idea of a temple. We'll build architecture around what we worship as a culture. So these monuments to capitalism, like the mall, is a great example. Really, it is the temple to Mammon.
True.
Those are the places where we should expect to see the most emphasis on liminal architecture, and I think that's what bears out.
Wow, that's brilliant.
And in our dream world or in our unconscious, we are still attracted to these images the same way these ancient people built in these temples, except they were doing it intentionally and we're doing it unconsciously.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. It's like you can't get rid of it. You can't exercise that part of yourself, even when we're trying to be intensely pragmatic and analytical and capitalistic. We still end up building liminal spaces.
Yes, it is the return of the repressed.
Yeah. Ooh, it's the return of the repressed. There's a good tagline. All right. Well, I think there's one or two more questions here, and then we'll wrap up our conversation. So let's see. There's a few here. Let's start with this one. If a design works, it could just be the way it's generated, though. No? Like how so many cultures have similar means for dream symbols. Yeah, I think that's what we're saying. It's like, even if you're in a different continent, there are some things that are essential to being human, and that's why you'll see these repeated themes, and that's why you'll see liminal spaces in Egyptian architecture, Greek architecture, American capitalism, or Oriental, like over in China and Japan and the Philippines. So yeah, I would agree with that. Would you kind of say the same thing?
Yeah, no, this is basically the Jungian collective unconscious and manifestation. The question then is like, well, why is it that these lateral civilizations around the equator seem to be the one that maybe not specifically and exclusively, but seem to really emphasize liminal spaces in their architecture, whereas other civilizations, particularly in the south or far north, don't seem to focus on it that much.
Actually, that is a good point. Yeah, interesting. Maybe future discussion. Let's see. Last thing here. The psyche liminal space churchy part, ? Is this why God is everywhere?
That's a very abstract question.
I agree. I'm not sure how to totally answer either.
The idea of God's omnipresence is something you see in almost every religion, but it's articulated very differently. And I think it's fair to say that most temple architecture is very conscious of that, and that's why it's so much material and resources are spent on temples. It's interesting. I was talking with a lawyer about this, but it's like, if Americans have temples other than the malls, it's really our court systems. The most majesty seem to go into these judicial places. It's like the last sacredness we have as a civilization, the American civilization, is the courthouse. That is where the God of justice is blind, and pray to Lady Justice that justice is served, right? And it's so prestigious and Roman in its architecture. So there is a sense in which the presence of the God of justice emanates there in a particular way. And hopefully because of that, it springs forth from there to the rest of the country, right? Ideally.
Right.
I think similarly, as an ancient classical equivalent, the idea is that if you give proper worship to the gods and you build temples to them, their presence emanates like a fountain, specifically at the temple, but spreads from the believer to the rest of society.
Which I think
if you read Confucius, it's all about that. He's basically saying that civilization only prospers if ritual is done correctly. A king could be terrible in every political statecraft. As long as he's making sure ritual is correctly followed, he will be successful.
Wow, good point. Which I think is a basic psychological truth, and it's a good metaphor for just being a human. That's cool. Well, damn, what a conversation. Thanks, Cory. I appreciate your time and talking about it. It was a lot of fun, man, watching some videos and just seeing how some of these like really old, long-term spiritual and metaphysical understandings still hold true, even in 2023 capitalism and us trying to find ourselves, but kind of getting lost inside of our own psyches. It's cool stuff, man. I appreciate it. Well, as always, go check out Cory's podcast, The 50-Minute Hour. It is on Spotify for sure, but I think you're doing some YouTube stuff these days, yeah?
The YouTube comes a bit later. The Spotify and iTunes is where we upload things first, usually a month after we record.
Beautiful, beautiful. Spotify and iTunes. I love it. Well, Cory, thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Jesse. See ya.
Bye.